Thank you, Mr. Roy. Dr. Katz.
Thank you, Senator. I also wanted to comment on testing, which I've seen up close and personal in the emergency department, and it is cumbersome. And one of the issues we have to overcome is the unreliability of a lot of the tests we're using. There still is a high false negative rate. But it does seem to me we're setting up a catch-22 if any semblance of return to normalcy is predicated on a number of tests we know we can't do and won't be able to do for the foreseeable future. I think we need to ask ourselves, what do we need the data for? We want to know what percent of the population is likely to get this infection. Is it everybody who's exposed, or is it 1 in 5? So far, it really looks to be about 1 in 5 on Navy ships, on cruise ships, and contained populations. Of the group that gets this, how many develop symptoms? Of those, how many need to be hospitalized? Of those, how many are likely to need the ICU? Of those, how many are at risk of dying? And on the basis of what antecedent risk factors? How does that shift with the presence or absence of hypertension, coronary disease, type 2 diabetes, body mass index, and other factors? When we think about the utility of data, we really aren't bogged down with testing millions of people. We need a representative random sample large enough to give us that actionable information. That's much more doable. We have the resources to do it now. It's proximal, it's the work of several days. And if the goal of getting data is not just to say, look how much data we have, but look what we now understand to inform policy, representative random sampling will do. The other thing I wanted to say is that there's an alternative to contact tracing. And that is to say, we identify people at higher risk and we carefully protect them from exposure to the virus. And people at low risk, we actually expect the virus to circulate. So contact tracing in that group almost defeats the purpose of saying low risk people, if we're ever going to get our lives back and not be on the indefinite timeline of maybe there will be a highly effective vaccine mass produced, we actually need the virus to circulate among people who can safely get it, get over it, make antibodies, which historically, before the advent of highly effective vaccines, was how pandemics ended. Immunity developed. But what we can do now, artfully, is say there are people who cannot safely get through this infection, we'll protect them. There are people who can, they can go back to the world. I think contact tracing at scale in that group is not likely to be helpful. And I think we should do better than contact tracing for the high risk, people over 70, people over 80, people with a large burden of chronic disease. We need to double down on protecting them so they're not exposed until we can document with ongoing, at least random sampling, that viral transmission is near zero, that a high level of protective immunity has been achieved, and then basically everybody's grandparents can hug their grandchildren safely again.
Okay.